Less than 48 hours before the general elections in Honduras, political violence remained as the main issue before, during, and after the electoral campaign. We have more on the matter in this news brief. This Friday in Venezuela, elections underway for the indigenous peoples. 8 states in the country will elect their indigenous representatives to the regional and municipal parliaments. India's farmers mark 1 year of protests and remain steadfast despite Prime Minister Narendra Modi's announcement to repeal 3 controversial agricultural laws. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Less than 48 hours before the general elections in Honduras, political violence has been the main issue before, during, and after the electoral campaign. According to data from the National Violence Observatory, since last January to date, 68 Honduran politicians have been assassinated, 19 of them in March, and 4 so far in November. In this sense, the Croatian Eurodeputy Zorjana Zovko, the head of the observers mission from the European Union, insisted on the need of the peaceful process in the country after meeting with Cardinal Oscar Andrés Rodriguez. Meanwhile, authorities are finalizing the last details before the elections, where only 15,000 Hondurans out of 1 million living abroad will be able to vote. In this Sunday's elections, more than 5 million citizens are called to elect the President of the Republic, 128 deputies to the Congress, 20 deputies for the Central American Parliament, 298 mayors, as well as more than 2,000 municipal representatives. In Honduras, 3 days shy of the electoral process, thousands of people could be left without the right to participate because the National Registry has not delivered the new identification card that will allow them to vote. Some 500,000 of those who registered in the census will not receive the document. Our correspondent Gilda Silvestrucci has more.
Where identity cards are handed out, hundreds of people are waiting to receive their documents. Although they registered more than a year ago, they still do not have their identifications. When I went to see the person who was giving them, they said that there was a wrong number. It was a year old. Well, the letters of the certificate that they give you were erased. The paper was in blank. More than 5 million people registered for the census, but even though the registration was on time, every time they go to the National Registry unit, they are told to come back another day. It was not ready. It did not appear in the system, but I was patient. I went and came back and went again. Days before the polls open, there is no response from the authorities in charge of the identification process, while voters are beginning to get used to the idea that they will not go to the polls. I have been going to all the places to Ciudad España, to Amarateca. They only make you happy. Here I have come 3 times, and the 3 times it's never there. It is a part of the mishandling of the National Registry before I went to the registry, and they took my identity card and now they don't. And now, who is going to pay for that ticket? Some opposition candidates suggest that this is a fraud strategy, given that 100,000 people from the opposition could be left out of the electoral process.
Here there will be at least 500,000 people left without voting because the process has been unsuccessful. Many people came many times and did not find their identity card and did not return, and there are a lot of identity cards that are not being delivered because people got tired of coming. So watch out, because here a fraud may be starting since some are being given their IDs and others are not.
The new census was part of the agreements between parties to counteract electoral fraud, as there were many deceased who appear as active voters, but now thousands will not be able to participate due to the delay in the process.
Gilda Silvestrucci, TeleSUR Honduras.
In Mexico, an additional 460 federal troops were deployed to Zacatecas for a total of more than 3,000 military to combat high levels of violence in the state. The federal government made the announcement at an event attended by President López Obrador and members of his cabinet. The deployment is the centerpiece of a new security plan for the northern state, Mexico's most violence on a per capita basis, with 96 homicides per 100,000 people in the 12-month period to the end of October. The new support plan was presented by the National Defense Minister Luis Crescencio Sandoval, who announced that 200 additional soldiers and 250 extra members of the National Guard will also be deployed. Sandoval said the military and the National Guard's presence will prevent confrontations between criminal groups that are generating the violence. The Jalisco Nuke Generation Cartel and the Sinaloa Cartel are among those that operate in the state. In Ecuador, a survey revealed a growing rejection towards Guillermo Lazo's neoliberal government. Latest polls stated that 67.3% of Ecuadorians qualify Lazo's administration as bad or very bad. His government has been qualified as bad by 49.15% of those polled, while 18.23% consider his government's policies as very bad. The director of the pollster Perfiles de Opinión, Paulina Recalde, pointed out that the consultation carried out between November 13 and 15 showed political instability. All this added to the former banker being named in the Pandora Papers over his offshore investments. He is now under investigation by both Ecuador's Attorney General and Congress, which could try to impeach him. On top of all this, the executive is struggling to stem a wave that got worse in late September, when more than 100 prisoners were killed in the country's worst-ever jail riot. The Fidel Castro Ruz Center, dedicated to the study and dissemination of the thoughts and work of the historic leader of the Cuban Revolution, was inaugurated in Havana as part of commemorations marking the 5th anniversary of his death. To honor him, the children's theater company La Colmenita performed a play specially created for the occasion. The center is the first and only building in Cuba to bear his name. Let us remember that a law enacted a month after his death in 2016 prohibits naming institutions, squares, parks, roads, or other public places after the former president and Communist Party leader. The only exceptions are made for institutions created solely for the study of and dissemination of his thinkings and work. Among the people present at the inauguration was the Venezuelan president Nicolás Maduro Moros, who visited the country for the first time since December 2019. The Venezuelan head of state was accompanied by his Cuban counterpart Miguel Díaz-Canel and former president Raúl Castro. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. Elections are about to happen this Friday in Venezuela for the indigenous peoples. 8 states in the country will elect their indigenous representatives to the regional and municipal parliaments. The voting date starts in the morning hours, where voters are exercising the right to vote in the 74 polling stations set up by the National Electoral Council for the 8 states of the country. The Minister of Indigenous Peoples, Roside González, also said that 69 councillors and 8 legislators will be elected in states such as Amazonas, Anzoátegui, Apure, Bolívar, Delta Amacuro, Monagas, Sucre, and Zulia. She also informed that the Council of Electoral Experts from Latin America and international observers will be present at the elections for the indigenous representation of the nation. Peruvians took to the streets to support President Pedro Castillo after opposition lawmakers presented a motion in Congress seeking to remove the president. Thousands of Peruvians marched through the streets of the capital, Lima, to the Legislative Palace and expressed their rejection to the attempt of right-wing lawmakers to unseat the president Pedro Castillo. Militants of the government party, Peru Libre, and members of social organizations had planned to march in demand of a constituent assembly, but they swift the demonstration due to the recent opposition threats. During a visit to the central Indian city of Huancavelic, Castillo called for dialogue and asked the legislature to approve the national budget 2022.
We are rejecting this vacancy request. Let President Pedro Castillo work. Why don't they say they are working for the people? We can only see them attacking and attacking, and until now they are not creating or producing a single law to favor the people.
Let's just stop the useless confrontation that hurts the country so much. Let's stop this confrontation that hurts so much our teachers, children. What are we waiting for to children attending schools with their peers and teachers?
On Friday, an alarming blaze raged at a textile-filled commercial building in the central Alameda area of Los Angeles, California in the U.S. During Thursday night, the flames took over the shopping center located in the central Alameda neighborhood. As the fire progressed, the building's roof collapsed. In an effort to protect adjacent businesses, firefighters were battling the flames by dropping water mounted on an aerial bladder. According to authorities, the facility, which was filled with densely packed textiles, had already been the scene of a fire on Tuesday. And the Russian police detained 3 men after a Siberian coal mine accident killed more than 50 people. Officials said the mine had filled with smoke in the early hours of Thursday after an apparent gas explosion. The miners were killed when coal dust caught fire and smoke quickly filled the Livaskayana mine through the ventilation system. There were 285 people in the mine when it happened, and miners described a frantic scramble to evacuate. Several workers lost consciousness, making the rescue more difficult. Flags flew at half-mast outside official buildings in Kemerovo, and relatives of the victims wept outside the snow-covered mine, the site, as a 3-day period of mourning was declared on Friday. President Vladimir Putin expressed his condolences to the families of the miners killed, calling it a great tragedy. President Alexander Lukashenko on Friday visited a shelter facility for the hundreds of migrants who remain in Belarus after attempting to cross into the EU via the Polish border. Thousands of migrants, mainly Iraqi Kurds, have spent months trying to get into the European Union from Belarus. The crisis escalated earlier this month, with around 2,000 setting up a makeshift camp on the border in freezing conditions. Western governments accuse Lukashenko of orchestrating the crisis in revenge for sanctions against Belarus. 8 groups said at least 11 migrants have died on both sides of the border since the crisis began.
Here, the majority of people who want to reunite with their families find their close compatriots who are in Germany. I say this to the German authorities: please take these people with you. This is not a big burden. They want to live in Germany. 2,000 people is not a big problem for Germany. We will do everything to fulfill your wishes. This is not populism. Everything will be as I tell you here. I promise you, everything that I can do and the state authorities of Belarus, we will do. We will persistently ask the Western states to help you.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. India's farmers mark 1 year of protests and remain steadfast despite Prime Minister Narendra Modi's announcement to repeal 3 controversial agricultural laws. Tens of thousands of farmers came out to demonstrate across India this Friday to mark a year of their protests against government reforms in this sector. In a surprise reversal ahead of elections in key states, Prime Minister Modi said last Friday the laws will be repealed when India's parliament meets later this month. After a year of continuous protests, farmers' unions welcomed the move, but decided not to end their protests until the laws are formally repealed.
We will stop the occupation of this highway as soon as the farm laws are officially repealed during the parliament session. After that, under our farmer union leaders' guidance, we will go back to our homes. We also face issues being here on the streets. We also want to go back. As long as the minimum price safety is not introduced by the government, we are staying here. We are moving only once MSP is implemented. Otherwise, we are not going.
In order to win the larger fight, we not only have to fight against the current government, but also need to understand that every farmer, every class of farmer has to be taken under consideration when we are going to talk about the well-being of farmers. And until the interests of all the classes of farmers are met, we will not be able to achieve the real victory, or victory in a real sense.
Iran's deputy foreign minister says negotiations on the nuclear deal will fail if Western countries do not withdraw unilateral coercive measures. Ali Bokhari Kani, Iran's deputy foreign minister for political affairs, assured on Thursday that any progress in the dialogues being held in Vienna must result in the elimination of sanctions against the Persian country and guarantee that a future United States government will not breach the nuclear agreement again. He also denounced that the government of Joe Biden is repeating the mistakes of his predecessor and is continuing the failed policy of maximum pressure against Iran. In turn, he called on the European countries to also compensate for the non-compliance with the nuclear treaty by implementing practical steps to remove the embargoes. Israeli court hands down 10-year sentence against Palestinian teenager after being detained since October 2019. Palestine media reported that an Israeli court issued a 10-year prison sentence against 17-year-old Mohammed Sabah after accusing him of attempting to carry out a stabbing attack in occupied Jerusalem. Sabah was arrested after being shot and seriously wounded by Israeli forces on October 28, 2019. He was held in Ramla Prison Hospital for 6 months, where he underwent several medical surgeries. Palestinian authorities claim that Israeli forces have arrested some 1,200 Palestinian minors in the occupied West Bank, including the old city of Al-Quds and the besieged Gaza Strip so far this year. Authorities in the Czech Republic have declared a 30-day of emergency as the country witnessed one of the world's highest coronavirus infection rates in recent days. The government on Thursday ordered bars and clubs to close at 10 p.m. and banned Christmas markets as well as drinking alcohol in public places in an attempt to stem one of the world's highest coronavirus infection rates. The new restrictions also include a maximum attendance of 1,000 people at cultural and sports events as long as they have been vaccinated or recovered from COVID-19, stopping short of sweeping lockdowns in neighboring Austria and Slovakia, where infection rates are even higher. According to the online publication Awarding Data, the country recorded an average of more than 1,000 daily COVID-19 cases per million population over the past week, the third highest in the world behind Slovakia and Austria. Eleven African countries are experiencing or have experienced the fourth wave of coronavirus, the head of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Africa said on Thursday. In his weekly virtual press conference, John Nganzen, director of the center, said that the countries affected are Algeria, Benin, Burkina Faso, Egypt, Eritrea, Kenya, Mali, Mauritania, Mauritius, Somalia, and Tunisia. The official said that the continent has received 403 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines, but only 55% of them have been administered. He added that only 6.6% of Africa's population of more than 1.2 billion is fully vaccinated, meaning that Africa is far from reaching the target of fully vaccinating 70% of people by the end of 2022. World Health Organization spokesperson Christian Lindmeier said it will take several weeks to understand the heavily mutated strain that emerged in the southern of Africa.
For us to understand what impact this variant has. Researchers are working to understand more about the mutations and what they potentially mean for how transmissible or virulent this variant is, and how they may impact our diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines.
WHO spokesperson Christian Lindmeier also said the organization cautions against imposing new travel restrictions over the new COVID-19 variant B.1.1.529.
That countries continue to apply a risk-based and a scientific approach when implementing travel measures in accordance with the temporary recommendations of the 9th Emergency Committee. And it is important to note that every travel measure should be always weighed, and that countries can do a lot already in terms of surveillance and sequencing, and work together with affected countries or globally to work scientifically to fight this variant and to understand more about it so that we know how to go about. So at this point, again, implementing travel measures is being cautioned against and taking a risk-based and a scientific approach.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website. But also, before we say our farewells and as Cuba commemorates the 5th anniversary of Fidel Castro's physical departure, we invite you to watch a short clip that illustrates the bond that the Cuban leader had with sports, as he considered it as a right of the Cuban people. And also, as we were saying, just remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel like you want to, follow us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.